everyone. I am Billy Dees. Welcome to the podcast. I am thrilled that you are here. If you're new to the program, we are primarily an interview and a commentary podcast. You can find us on iTunes, which is Apple Podcasts if you have an iPhone. We're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Stitcher, all the real big ones. You can check us out on any of those platforms. You can follow me on Twitter at Billy Dees. That's kind of my social media home. And today on the studio line, I have Perry Block. How are you doing, man?
Hey, Billy. How are you today?
I am doing fantastic. Now, Perry's an interesting guy. He's pretty talented. He's an author, a comedian, and I would say a pretty decent, good guy. Nothing great, but a pretty good guy, right?
Boy, you're on to me already. I didn't realize I was that easy to see through. But
yeah, well, I'm right there with
accurate.
you. So. Okay, very good. We're going to talk about some of the things that Perry has done, and he, like I said, he's a comedian, funny guy. But I with all that's going on now, there's no ignoring the coronavirus. So with a lot of the interviews here lately, we've been discussing it a little bit. And now, Perry, refresh my memory. You are from the Philly area, is that correct?
That's right. Philadelphia, born and raised. I was one of the first people to say that. Philadelphia. Not West Philadelphia, but yeah, from Philly. Spent most of my life here and am here now.
Okay.
The Philly suburbs.
Right. What I was going to ask you is what's the situation there in Philadelphia? I mean, here in Ohio, very restricted. Restaurants and bars are closed. You can't have gatherings over a certain number of people. They're encouraging people to work from home. What's going on there in Philly?
We have the same situation here. The schools are closed, encouraging people to mostly work from home if they can. Restaurants and bars are only for takeout and delivery.
Yeah.
And in a way that foreshadows my wisdom from years ago, all of the gyms are closed down so that you can't go to the gym. Now, I pioneered that years ago, not going to the gym. I kind of a little proud of myself that I predicted that trend. So I guess you would say I'm a trendsetter as well. But
right.
that is probably very similar to the way that it is where you are.
I would say, yeah. One of the things that gets discussed a lot is how much of this is a real threat and how much of it is hysteria. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Perry, on a scale of 1 to 10, 0, let's start with 0 to 10, 0 being that it is an absolute hoax. Okay, it's nothing to worry about.
Okay.
And number 10 would be that this is an extinction level event. Okay, life on Earth as we know it may change. Okay, on that scale of 1 to 10, what would you say this is?
Okay, well, if we're ranking my level of hysteria, my personal level of hysteria, that would be a 10. It's always hovering high like that, but that would be a 10. In terms of the real threat, I think it's an 8. Yeah. I think that, so I'm giving it an 8 and a 10. So together an 18, that's pretty high.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
But yeah, really. I'm just holding it together talking to you now. But I think that the thing is, we're lagging behind knowledge of where it is because of the lack of testing and the fact that I don't think we're getting accurate testing in from a lot of the other countries. So we don't really know. So we're looking, we're kind of like looking at what was a couple weeks ago, and it's changing constantly. So I think we don't really know where we are. Obviously, it's very serious. Is it so serious that we should be closing down the planet? Maybe not, but we don't know because we're looking at it behind. So I'm going to give it some credit, not credit, but I'm going to say maybe it's not quite as bad as we think. But clearly, it is a true threat, and I know there are some people who do think it's a hoax, but hopefully, they hopefully with proper therapy, they'll come through it, and they'll come back to the planet. So
here's the issue. that a lot of people don't understand that I've talked to. I do believe it is a threat. I would stop short of saying that it's going to end the world, but it is certainly a threat. And here in Ohio, I've run into a lot of people that don't understand why healthy people are being, made to stay home, why they can't do this or that or the other thing. And we had this, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about millennials coming up, but there was the situation last weekend and even this weekend where the spring breakers are still out in full force. And people don't understand, well, why, if I'm not in the group that's getting sick, if I'm not in the group that's threatened, why do I need to stay home? Well, here's the answer to that. With the flu, for example, it's really easy to write off any disease and say, well, through the course of a year, so many people are going to die of something. That's just the way things go. And that is true. Okay. That's not to minimize anyone's death, but that's simply the way life works. And with the flu, we have roughly tens of millions of people who have the flu. And most of these flu cases do pass without incident. But we do have, upwards of tens of thousands of deaths, 30, 40, depending on what year it is and what strain it was and so on and so forth. Now, with that being said, this fits into the category of somebody is going to die of something because we're at a death rate that's about 0.01%, which is deaths per thousand is a fraction of one. All right.
Right.
And the other thing is that we know how the flu virus behaves. Okay, it's not a mystery. It might be strong, it might be weak. We're often on some of the precise predictions, but it doesn't do a 180 on us. For the most part, we know how flu behaves. Okay, now with that being said, with the coronavirus right now, we have a mortality rate that's hovering between 2 and 3%. I've heard both. So what that means is deaths per thousand are well into the whole numbers. Okay, you're talking 20 or 30 people dead per thousand. And if we would have as many people infected with corona as we do the flu, which is upwards of, as they say, 30, 50, 40 million, whatever, we would have close to 900,000 people dead. And here's the real thing, too, is when you have healthy people creating somewhat of, I will call it a laboratory for the virus to experiment in. We have a country of 330 million people. Okay. And what happens is even if you are healthy and you come into contact with this virus, and maybe it doesn't make you particularly sick, but you pass it along to someone else, that virus has now learned a little bit about you, how to defeat your immune system, and it's taking it on to the next level. So it can change and it can evolve and it can become very dangerous. And that's one of the things right now that they're worried about in Italy. And as you know, they've had hundreds of deaths in just the last 24 hours.
That's right.
They've had they've had more deaths in Italy than they have had in China. And it's getting the younger people there now. Okay, because it's just, it's playing in an open field. And that's why we have to keep healthy people at home. So we don't give this thing a chance to experiment with itself and evolve. Okay.
Right.
It's not, it's not just a matter of the people who are high risk, whether it be older folks or people who have underlying conditions. But even if you are healthy, if you allow this thing to make its way through society, it could become potentially something that is harmful to healthy people. So that's one of the reasons why they're making everybody stay home, is just to give this thing an opportunity to hopscotch around, to keep that at a minimum. So a lot of people aren't getting that, but maybe they will in time. I don't know. Now, Perry, let's get back to you.
So now that was very comprehensive. Now, can you administer a true-false test to me and I become a doctor? I really know stuff now. That was terrific. I like the sound of that.
Okay, well,
that was
that's
very
awesome.
That was great. That was very erudite, and I agree 100% with what you said, so that I sound intelligent to your listeners. Okay.
Well, I would advise this. I am not a medical professional, as they always say. I just play one on TV, right?
and on the radio, obviously, too.
And by all means, research this yourself.
Right.
And go to fact checking sources online. Don't so much listen to ideologues.
No, but it was so comprehensive that I think the coronavirus is over now. Look out the window. No, that was very good. I think that was very important.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Billy.
Okay.
Now do I get to speak or what?
Yeah, okay. I don't think you've been stopped so far, have you?
Okay, no, I'm ready.
All right. Barry is a boomer, a self-proclaimed boomer, and that's kind of where I want to go with this, because this does tie into the politics of this.
It does.
It does. And you know, I always felt that if there was something that could unite the country, something like this would do it. But it hasn't happened. We're as political with this as we are with anything else. I'm thoroughly convinced that if aliens came to our country and took over the world, Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump would be pointing fingers at each other saying, it's your fault.
Right. But they would be siding with the different aliens. Nancy Pelosi would side with Og, and Trump would side with the Zordas. And it would further break up. I agree.
You're exactly right. But anyway, since you have wrote the book, and by the way, I met you working for your publisher. You wrote a book, Nouveau Old, Formerly Cute. Do I have the title right?
That's what it's called. That's right.
And it is still available on Amazon.
Oh my God! It's live and kicking on Amazon. In fact, there's so few things that you can do now. You know, during the time of the isolation here, that reading a good, funny book by a boomer is just what the doctor ordered. I would recommend that everyone go to Amazon and cheer up their days and weeks ahead with Perry Block. What is it called? Oh, Nouveau Old, Formerly Cute.
Absolutely. And this is a humor book. We want to stress this is a humor book, but I'm going to take this to this conversation here. Since that book came out, it was starting to rear its head then. There was this certain friction between boomers and millennials then. But it has really grown now.
Yes, but not in the part of this boomer. I love every generation. There is kind of like a friction in the environment now. But I want to say right up front that I love the boomers, my own generation. I love the millennials. My son, who figures prominently in the many hilarious sections of this book, is a millennial, and often there was the kind of the interplay between the two of us was quite a part of that book. So I personally love I love the Gen Xers too. I don't even know who they are, but I love them. And what's the group after the millennials? I plan to start finding out about them soon and loving them as well. But there is a friction. It seems to be. I don't think it's on the part of the boomers. I mean, some boomers would say the millennials are snowflakes. They want to have everything their own way.
They do say that.
What is this business with, ideological purity tests and safe words and things like that? And I guess, is that where yes boomer comes from? Is that where that? Yeah.
Well, the okay boomer.
Okay boomer. That's right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's a hashtag, by the way. And this has now become a pejorative.
Yeah, I know.
And by the way, anybody can get called okay boomer. It seems that anybody who's really young, if they just want to end the conversation, they say, yeah, okay boomer, whatever. All right, that's the new thing.
I mean, they'll say that to anybody when they want the conversation to be over. It's like
absolutely, they'll say it to anyone.
It's like, bye, Felicia. Is it something like that? See, I want to show how hip I am. I know millennial stuff. Bye, Felicia. Okay, I knew that. I've known that for years.
Karen, yes. Yeah, don't be now. Karen is from what I understand, that's the the stereotypical millennial woman. Okay.
Oh, you got me there.
Okay, well, that's not important. But what I was getting at was the okay boomer has become a pejorative. And by the way, I'm a Generation X, and you're right. Nobody says anything about us because we didn't do anything.
Hey, who the hell are you? What's distinctive about you?
We partied during the 80s. The 80s were a good time.
Is that where you are in the 80s?
Yeah, we grew up in the we were. I think the qualifier is they're born in the late '60s, but like you said, it doesn't qualify to be a boomer unless you actually experience the '60s. So
I agree, '50s and the '60s. Yeah, I agree.
So I'm not sure where it ends, but I believe being a Generation X is late '60s through the '70s. I'm not sure, but most of us were young adults during the 1980s, and we loved Ronald Reagan, we loved Ronnie, and we liked to party, and we liked '80s rock and roll. So there you go.
So was that true that the Gen Xers were a little more politically conservative than the baby boomers, I guess? Is that the case?
Actually, if I've Googled them, and what they are characterized by is not caring about anything. So,
okay.
We kind of just, hey, whatever, we're gonna go to the club.
The insipid generation. No, I don't really know that. I guess I babysat you. Not you personally, but I guess I babysat Gen Xers. The thing about the boomers is that, we were obviously not all, but, we were demonstrating in the 60s, and we were for liberal causes. And it was, as you know, a pretty exciting time. By the time we got up to Ronald Reagan, we still didn't like him. But secretly, we would say he is kind of an engaging guy. You can't help but like him. I mean, I wouldn't say that in public. I wouldn't say that to my liberal friends. But, we had this thing like, he is, kind of like screwing over the disadvantaged and the poor people, and we don't like his policies. But goddamn, he's nice. So, I mean, we remained at least socially active in what we would verbalize.
Well, that's the stereotype. But actually, Reagan, by today's standards, and that's a big preface, really wouldn't be considered a conservative.
He's Winston Churchill by today's standards. My God, he's he's Benjamin Disraeli by not to get political about comparing him to anybody else that might make me want to vomit, but he's a prince. But but I wanted, to his credit,
he was ahead of the impending immigration crisis. He says there has to be a way to do something about this. He did not give the NRA everything they wanted.
I know, and he kind of won the Cold War. I mean, not that it stayed won; it didn't stay won. He kind of did win the Cold War. I can't take that away from him.
And he did raise taxes. He did it a number of times. Now, conservatives and liberals debate this, but in actuality, they're both right. He raised taxes, but he did not do sweeping raises. He did strategic raises. But anyway, so by today's standards, he was not a true conservative, because today, to be a true conservative, you have to be out the door right.
Oh, yeah.
And same with liberalism now. You have to be off the rails left. There is no in between.
To some degree, though, with the whole idea of ideological purity test, which the only purity test I know is for soap now, but I don't. I would agree that those things are excessive. What I wanted to say real quickly about the whole thing about boomer and the boomer generation is, our generation, and I know you know this because we've talked about this, Billy, kind of lived through probably the greatest transition in generations, certainly in the last century, going from the 50s to the 60s. And that's our unique experience. And baby boomers, I always say, had one foot in the 50s and one foot in the 60s. We know the black and white 50s when everything was fine, everything was white bread, there was nothing wrong in the world. Superman was on television. I love that. It's George Reeves. Ozzie and Harriet, Leave It to Beaver. Robin Laura Petrie couldn't sleep in the same bed. Hair was short. To go to the 60s, where suddenly, everything changed. So our hair was to our knees. We did see, rightly so, that our government could lie to us, that everything wasn't as we hoped it was. We finally caught on. I mean, I'll be really honest. In the 50s, I didn't know why, Black people, Native Americans, what were they upset about? We lived in an insulated life. Suddenly, I saw all these things. We saw them and we experienced them. So, our becoming woke back then was very real, because it was for most of us, was an eye-opener that things were just not the way we believed they were, and that in many cases they were goddamn unfair. And I think that was very positive. I mean, since then, of course, everybody's experiences has gone out in different directions, and people have different philosophies and so forth. And they're liberal, they're conservative. But the experience of the baby boomer really was, for all the excesses of that period, really was a true awakening to the fact that everything wasn't,
certainly,
everything wasn't. I'm searching for everything wasn't okay in Hooterville or whatever that expression is. So, I mean, I think that maybe other generations have had that, but I think that is something that was very valid that we experienced that marks our generation. So when people say, and I get it, because we are old people to the millennials, but when they say "okay, boomer" to us, I'm just going to say, yeah, maybe we are behind the times now, and we are stodgy now, and we don't understand you. But there was a coming of age realization and a learning that we had that I don't know that anyone else has ever had or will have before. So, yeah, I mean, I get it because, I look in the mirror and I think I would say, okay, boomer to me, I don't want to be this old guy, but there's a reality to our experience that maybe they don't get when they're saying, okay, boomer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would.
I will give you that. I do believe that there was a monumental cultural shift during the 60s. And your guys' idealism was, without question. I believe you guys really believed what you were saying about the peace and love and all that other stuff. But with that being said, I'm going to say, I'm going to throw this back at you. Comparing boomers today, the boomers with millennials today, there was a video that's gone viral within the last 24 hours. And a reporter or somebody walked up to somebody that was partying on the beach. And he or she asked this young man, why are you out here when there's all these warnings to avoid crowds and everything? And his answer was something to the effect of like, well, if I get it, I'll probably live through it anyway. It's only going to affect, the older people. And I'm not going to let this virus get in the way of me partying. Okay.
Yeah.
Now that's obviously a very selfish statement, and it certainly is not representative of all millennials and younger, but there's thousands of people out on that beach.
Yeah,
so
I saw that video of all the things.
Okay, so with that being said, I know that there is a disdain by younger people for older folks. I mean, you guys were the ones that said don't trust anybody over 30, right?
And I believe that too.
Yeah. So there's an element of that. But do you feel I don't see the boomers back in the 60s saying something like that with a disregard for everybody else except themselves? Quite frankly, I'll give you guys more credit than that.
Okay. Don't. I mean, there was definitely a self-righteousness. I mean, self-righteousness among people of our generations. I mean, we kind of like looked askance at the older generation. I mean, I didn't particularly because I knew that my parents were paying for me to go to college. So I certainly did not knock the older generation at all. But we did think that they were clueless when it came to some of the things we thought, and certainly our music, the things we liked, and some of our viewpoints.
Yeah.
But, it varies. I mean, I do think that there is always probably youth looking at old people and saying, what's the deal with you folks?
Sure. Yeah. There's always going to be that.
And I do get that. I mean, I think all of that is true. With respect to millennials today, look, for example, now I think that, for every guy on the beach, such as you saw, there's somebody who, let's say, was working hard for Bernie Sanders who really believed in his causes.
Absolutely.
I might think at this point in time that some of the things that Bernie espouses are a little naive. But we had George McGovern.
Yeah.
And we all worked for him. And, it was the same kind of thing. And I'm not against anything that Bernie is for. It's just we've been around long enough to know that they're not practical. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is millennials run the gamut too, from the guy who's partying on the beach who doesn't get it, that maybe one day they could get sick and, many years from now actually not be here, to the guy who's working his butt off on woman, working their butt off for Bernie, who really believe in what he cares about. So I don't knock the millennials at all. I guess I don't really lump the millennials into any one group because, I guess we boomers have been around long enough to know you can't do that. There's general trends, but
you guys were the original authors of the political correctness, right? I mean, it wasn't called that.
Right. I would say that was true. I say that was that was the. Well, I always tell this story. In fact, it's in my book. Can I tell it real quickly? Quick story.
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
I actually almost like to read it, but that would be boring, huh?
Yeah, that wouldn't be good.
Yes, especially the way I read it. Yeah, thanks a lot, Billy. Anyway, I was at a peace march.
Reading is never good. Reading is never good. I mean, it's never good on when you're on the radio.
On the radio. Okay. No, it's in the book. And if you like this story, folks, don't forget Amazon, Nouveau, Old Formula Q, Perry Block. Okay. I was at a peace march in the 60s, which we did go to. That was something that we
you guys went to those. Yeah.
Went to in Washington. And we believed in the issues, but, I wouldn't say that there weren't a number of us who weren't there trying to look at women and, and maybe, hook into some marijuana. We didn't call it weed back then. The term weed existed, but we called it dope. And I was, in this group and kind of gravitated towards these freaky looking guys on a blanket there, kind of passing around some dope. And up ahead of us, and it was very cold, up ahead of us, there was a woman speaking, and she was way up ahead, and you couldn't really see who it was. And I said, gee, you know who that is? And this one freaky looking guy on the blanket said, oh, that's Loretta Young.
Oh.
Loretta Young. Now, a lot of your listeners won't know who Loretta Young is, but you know.
Probably not.
I know. You know the name?
Yeah, she was an actress.
She was an actress on a television show in the 50s. And she had been a star in the 40s and so forth. Very straight-laced, very proper, very much not of the counterculture. And
no,
I said,
not at all.
Loretta Young? And he said, oh, yeah, man, Loretta Young. And then the guy next to him said, no, that's not Loretta Young. And I said, who is it? He said, the other guy said, that's Coretta Scott King.
Oh.
So, Loretta Young, Coretta Scott King, their names sound somewhat alike.
Yeah.
Except one was the widow of the Reverend Martin Luther King and a civil rights leader in her own behalf, and the other one was a mundane actress from the 50s. And the point was that not everybody was a true believer back then. There were plenty of them out trying to score dope and meet women who didn't know Coretta Scott King from Loretta Young.
Yes.
So what I say is you can't, generalize. I mean, for every true believer, there was a guy like that there who was just looking to be high and didn't know the difference between them. So I don't, really typify the I'm not saying our generation was better than it. There were people who were into it, people who were not into it, people who pretended to be in it, people who, of every different, type in every generation. And that was my generational experience. And I'll never forget that moment. It was kind of the first moment I thought, gee, I know I'm somewhat shallow. I'm not, I have friends that got arrested, for, being, really putting themselves in line. I said, I wouldn't do that. And I finally, for the first time, realized there are people who are way more shallow than I am. There are people who really are just here to mouth the words. And they probably all became successful stockbrokers later on. I don't know. But it was kind of like a revelation for me. And I kind of became, not a super activist, but just a little bit more like I wasn't going to say the words without meaning them after that, because it kind of what's the point of it?
Exactly. Sure.
Sorry that took so long, but I thought that was kind of an interesting aspect.
Yeah, I get your point that there was a lot of people who weren't necessarily woke back in the 60s. And, it wasn't all about peace and all this. There were people who just went somewhere to party. Yeah. And they
I get that. Got invited to a lot better parties than I did by them.
That's funny. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, before I let you go, I know that you're in that improv group. I did catch the comedy video you guys did. That was funny.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And is there anything any place online or around Philadelphia that you want to talk about in terms of things you're up to?
Well, right now there won't be anything because everything's closed down.
Yeah, sure.
The name of our sketch group, and there is a Facebook site. I haven't checked it recently. We're called Lady Suits. LADYSUITS. We're a Philly comedy group.
Okay.
We're mostly sketch comedy. There will be some more things on there gradually. I'm hoping my sketch about Tom Hanks is on there. Did you know?
Oh, okay.
About Tom? We are the support group for the people who dislike Tom Hanks.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I really do like him. It's just that the premise of the group is all these people who, for one reason or another, don't like Tom Hanks, who have been
and there's got to be somebody out there who don't like him.
Who have been ostracized and discriminated against, and we band together. The Tom Hanks dislikers, and there's more. Lady Suits. You might want to check that out. There is some content there. I don't know how much, but
okay.
I'm there along with my cohorts.
Right.
And there's the book, and there's that, and that's what I'm up to, at least when I can get out of the house.
Awesome. Well, Perry, I want to tell you, it's always fun to talk to you. Perry comes on the program here every once in a while, chit-chats with us. It's always a good experience having you on. Your insights into the 60s generation are always appreciated, and they usually come with some humor as well.
Yeah, and the 60-year-old, too, which is also my generation. But
the book is Nouveau Old, Formerly Cute by Perry Block. It is available on Amazon. Perry, thank you very much for coming out and being on our podcast. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Billy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And thanks to the folks at home or on listening on your phone or whatever it is that you do. Don't forget, you can find the Billy Dees podcast, as I said at the top of the program, on your favorite podcast service. And if you have Spotify enabled on your Alexa device, you can just ask it to play the Billy Dees podcast, and we're right there. Once again, you can follow me on Twitter, but you have to be nice now, at Billy Dees, and tweet at me anytime. Thank you very much for listening, and we will be talking to you again very soon. Well, hello everyone. I am Billy Dees from the self-titled Billy Dees podcast. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and many more of the best podcast networks. Join me for my commentary and interviews. Follow me on Twitter, real easy to find, at Billy Dees. I am Billy Dees. I'd love to have you listen in.